Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Let's start. So today we're going to have a very interesting topic, in my opinion. This used to be like a sure shot thing in like even 5 years ago. If you take a look at it, there used to be like a sure shot question on burning cost and frequency severity. But of late, I think what's happening is that there has been like a lot more of there's right, rather than saying that there's going to be a sure shot question, I think we can say that there'll be a sure shot question on either 14, 15 or 16 and 17, right? Before, if you take a look at the previous year's papers and all, like GLM used to be like a fairly rare occurrence in the question papers. But I think of late, I think if you take a look at the last 3 years or 4 years, I find more GLM questions than burning cost questions. However, I think this is the basic framework that is used even in GLM, because at the end of the day, when you create a GLM or when you create even exposure curves or something like that, you're fundamentally trying to model frequency and severity, right? You're trying to model risk premium. So this is like a good introduction to that class. And we are going to solve exam level questions today to kind of get you up to speed on how to solve these kind of questions. And those questions will also have an element of actuarial judgment that you will have to apply, which is going to be like a very interesting thing. And we'll also discuss how those actuarial judgment points are treated in an exam setting, right? So what is the weightage that gets given? So today's class is just going to be two things, which is burning cost model, frequency severity model, which is effectively chapter 14. And then we solve a couple of questions from the exam, right? There is one question which I have put here, but I have not solved, and I'll explain why. Because it's a question that was asked. It's like a one-off question that was asked. I have put it, but I have not solved it here. I will provide the solution separately, right? So we'll get to the question when we ask, right? So first, with respect to terminology, how many people are aware of this? Let's take a quick poll. So can you guys tell me what frequency is?
Number of claims
Divided exposure. All right. What is severity?
Average severity is number of claim losses by the number of claims.
Good. So what is the definition of burning cost then?
Average severity into average frequency.
Good.
Or frequency.
So
Severity.
what is the equation there? So you can basically equate that, right? So frequency is number of claims by exposure, severity is claim amount by number of claims. So burning cost is nothing but claim amount by exposure, right? So we've already discussed, burning cost is nothing but the amount of money you expect to lose on every policy that you underwrite, which basically means that if my burning cost is 100 rupees, which means that for every policy that I underwrite, I'm going to lose 100 rupees. And the indication here is that the premium has to be at least 100 rupees for me to cover all my losses, right? So the burning cost or the pure risk premium is the true indicator of profitability for the company. If your premium is lower than your burning cost, it means that you are not even covering the burning cost, that you're not even covering the losses that you're supposed to cover, right? It basically means that you're severely underpriced. Leave alone all the other added components of the uh, uh, added components of the office premium calculation that we have seen. Even if your premium is so low that it does not even cover your burning cost, then something has gone seriously wrong in your pricing mechanism, or some kind of external force is at such a big play that you are okay with losing money on the business that you're underwriting, right? So overall approach for both burning cost modeling and frequency severity modeling is the same. It is just that frequency severity modeling is a slightly more tedious approach because it's got two components, right? It's got frequency components and it's got severity components. So you have to model the two components separately, which creates a lot of time constraints for you, right? So, but the overall approach is pretty much the same. It starts with data requirements, right? So the data is required. You will have to estimate how much data you have so that you can identify whether you can parameterize the distribution or not, right? Data is also usually provided by the customer or intermediary provide when the cases are individually written and not exposure written, right? When there is experience rating, a lot of the data comes from brokers, a lot of the data comes from intermediaries, web aggregators. So this is where you have to identify, and if you are working in an insurance company, right, the first thing I would advise you to do is for different lines of business, go through the proposal forms you guys have in your companies. Even if you're not working in the pricing function, if you are exposed and if you have the ability to do that, I would urge you to do that. And I'll tell you why. It's a very valuable exercise for you guys as actuaries to know what exact questions get asked to the customers. Not only do you understand the pain points of insurance as a business, because the proposal forms actually is directly correlated with the amount of pain points that are there in the market, right? And I can tell it to you as both an actuary and as a broker of how problematic that particular data collection process is, right? So go through those proposal forms and you will see by line of business how the data requirements vary. So you will start noticing how data requirements for motor are actually very less because you need very less data to price motor policies because there are so many third-party aggregation services that you can actually use. Right? For example, there is a service called Vahan. I don't know. Do you guys know what Vahan is?
Yes.
So Vahan is basically a VIN service, a VIN lookup service. So if you put the registration number of a vehicle, you have a third party service which fetches all the data of the vehicle and the driver in one API call, which basically means that for you to insure a vehicle today, you don't need any data input from a customer. You can automatically get the data from a third party verified service, which is the government verified service, and you can insure the vehicle without the customer having to make any edits in the proposal form, right? So that is the level of detail. And you also have other services which can take data from PAN and, get your address and these things, right? So you have this level of comfort for one particular line of business. It goes from this level to look at maybe a cyber policy, right? And look at the proposal form for cyber. There are two proposal forms that customers will have to fill. And the first one is basically the actual proposal form for the cyber risk. And the second is a risk questionnaire that you'll have to fill, right? Which goes to the IT teams, the InfoSec teams of the company, where they assess the risk of the customer for various different types of risk before the pricing is released. So it's a good exercise for you guys to actually look at the amount of data that is required for each line of business. And that gives you, I'll tell you why you have to do this, because it gives you a good idea to add nuance to your answers, right? Tomorrow, when there's a question on data collection, you can actually say, boss, cyber, these are the problems that are there, and you get marks for that, right? But not only for, I'm making this recommendation not only from a, what do you say, from a question paper marks perspective, but it also grows, you also grow as an actuary when you understand the problems that your customers are facing, right? At the end of the day, your role as an actuary is to grow the business and grow the business profitably, right? And if this is a problem that the business is facing, this is something that you have to solve. So it's a good exercise, in my opinion. I would urge you guys over the week, do it, and you will have a special, what do you say, you'll have a special appreciation for the amount of data that you collect and how difficult it is. You'll understand the IT side of things, and that kind of makes you better actuaries in the long run, right? So good aside, in my opinion. So next one is basically the components, right? So when you go through the data provided, you'll also look at the components of the data that is there. So another aspect that you will wonder, you'll have to start considering is, what data do you ask? So for example, there'll be a submission document, there'll be information about the exposure of the client. So if you are an individual risk, for example, you will require a lot of the data about the client, right? What are the risk management practices? What is the loss history of the client? So this primarily happens in group health policies. So when there's a group health proposal that comes to your table, I don't know how many of you have done group health pricing. When group health proposals come to your table, more often than not, what is asked is what is the loss experience of this company, right? What is the loss experience for the past 2 years or 3 years? If you can get that, that helps. And it's generally provided by the broker when there is a large client. So let's say that there's an Infosys that's quoting for a group health policy, right? It behooves the insurance company to identify what the loss history has been for the past 3 years to kind of better understand how the loss ratios are going to function, right? So exposure information is very important. Loss information is also very important, right? A couple of issues that generally you get from a data perspective when you're collecting data is consistency between claims and premium information is generally not very accurate because this is human provided data, right? And there's always going to be errors in there. Completeness is a major issue, and sometimes base periods could be different, right? So these are all practical issues that people face on a day-to-day basis. No solution has been. I want to say no solution has. I don't want to say no solution has been found, but solutions have not yet been clearly found. So there are some solutions people use. For example, they use CRM systems, they use connected systems and things like that, but no solution has been found till date, at least for the Indian market, right? Once you get the data, you will do trending, and trending is something that we covered in chapter 12 and chapter 13, right? So you trend the losses, you obtain them to ultimates, then you trend you obtain the trends, you check for unusual activity, history, any unusually large or, heavy or light experience. Then you account for inflation of claims. Then you see large claims. Then you see CAT claims. Then you see changes to the terms and conditions of the policy. You see if there are changes in the reinsurance programs that are there in the past. And then you account for claims separately, right? And you account for large losses separately by doing the three things that we discussed. The first easiest option that you can do is to basically completely ignore large losses. That is a very viable option if there have only been one large loss, for example, in the past 5 years or 6 years or something like that, right? In that scenario, it makes sense to kind of ignore the large loss. It might not reoccur, right? You have a judgment call that you make. Second option is to cap large losses. And the third option, which is more commonly used, is to create a large loss loading and aggregate and find an average large loss that you can do and provide the large loss, split the large loss across various time periods. Similarly, CAT losses can be ignored completely if there are very few and far between, or more often than not, there is generally a CAT model that each insurer has, which then gets converted to a CAT loading. So if you have a CAT loading, you will not have to account for CAT in your frequency severity model, right? You'll remove the CAT losses from there, and then you'll add the CAT loading separately. Once you finish the trending, you again develop the one note about developing the losses. You have to develop the losses to the ultimate figures. And this is where the reserving component, the SP7 component, ties in as well, right? So you have to consider two things. One is reported claims that have been reported but not yet settled. So this is basically your outstanding claims reported cohorts. And the second one is occurred but not reported, right? Which is your IBNR. So you have to, there are multiple methods that are there. This is the focus of SP7. You have your basic chain ladder method. You have your Bonnet-Ferguson. You have your expected loss ratio and things like that. So you use all those methods to identify and obtain your ultimates. And you develop sometimes for experience-based cases, you also develop individual losses, right? So let's say that a broker brings a individual client to you, right? Employer's liability individual client to you, says he's got data for 5 years, loss data for 5 years. Then he gives you the loss data, and then it's got like 5 claims, and say 2 of them are open. So your job as an actuary would have to be to find out where those 2 open claims are going to land, and you will develop those claims separately, and then you will find out the ultimates. One part of developing losses would also be to account for any changes in terms and conditions that are there. Perfect example, are there any changes to deductibles, right? And this is very what do you say? This is a very big nuance in liability policy pricing, right? At least in India. I'm not talking about the other geographies. But in India, it's a big thing because a lot of clients tend to increase their liabilities at point of renewal to reduce their premiums. So when such a condition comes to you, your job would be to simulate how that changes. Change the liability, see what the impact has been on the historical losses, and then come to the pricing separately, right? And once you arrive at all these things, your job would then be to fit separate distributions for frequency and severity, right? Frequency, most often used distribution is Poisson and a negative binomial. For severity, you can use either log normal, Weibull, gamma, or Pareto. And one thing here is, this is, like I mentioned, this is the starting for all your GLMs, all your regressions as well. Because in regression, in GLMs, you are going to see the same distributions that are used to support the frequency and severity predictive variables, right? So good introduction in my opinion, right? With respect to the fitting process, just one small point here is that usually most of the distribution, the choice of the distribution, right? Most of it is usually done by software. So right now, if you take a look at Emblem will automatically kind of fit the distribution for you, right? And not only Emblem, right? So most of late, I am seeing a lot of usage in Python, and Python already has existing libraries where you can automatically create fits, right? So for example, there's a library called scikit-learn, and there's a library called TensorFlow. TensorFlow is Google's library, right? And your job as a data scientist and your job as an actuary is to clean the data, ensure that the data is in a format that is readable by TensorFlow. With in this case, create tensors and load it in, right? And the fit is automatically done by these libraries. So you don't have to spend a lot of time and effort that we used to spend, say, maybe even 10-15 years ago, to identify whether or not the distributional fit exists, because that is automatically done today, right? It's taken care of today. So most common methods that are used, you need to understand what methods are being used. That's very important to understand how the fit is happening. So one is maximum likelihood, which is MLE. The other one is MLS, which is method of least squares. And the other is method of movements. These are not very important for this particular section. This is there in the text. So I'm just, this is just background information for you. You don't have to, this is not something that gets tested a lot, right? Special consideration that you have to account for when you're building these kind of models, any frequency severity model or burning cost model, obviously parameter error and model error. We reviewed this back in chapter 12 when we looked at all the different types of errors that are there, right? So parameter error is the error that is there in the parameters around the model, and model error is the error of the model itself, right? Where potentially, for example, a distribution could be incorrect or something like that, right? So model error has decreased to a certain extent, in my opinion. Parameter error still exists for any model that is there, right?
What about
Yeah.
process error?
Process error is also there. I didn't enter this because the text only talks about parameter error, nothing else. But there is also process error. So process error is effectively nothing but the underlying error of the insurance business itself. That is process error, right? So what is the process that you're modeling? You're modeling insurance claims, and insurance claims inherently will have error. So process error will exist wherever you want to, wherever that what you're modeling is insurance claims, and they have fundamental errors in them, right? So you will have, for example, changes to development patterns, which is like a point of process error, right? So there are multiple error points. There is even human error, for example, right? You could screw up the model. So there are, like, when it comes to errors, right? Always remember, it's not just one error which is going to be there, right? Everything is an error. So make sure you have to be comfortable to start talking about errors, and it's like, this is how you should think, right? So you're right. Think about more errors, and this is what is there in the text is just a guide. What is you have to ensure that you are in a position to think wider than what the text says, right? Accounting for parameter errors, this is again not been tested, in my opinion, right? If you want, I can separately provide like a understanding of what these methods are. However, I would say that these are extremely technical in nature and very unlikely to be asked, right? How do you account for parameter error? There's a method called bootstrapping. There's a method called there's a method to asymptotically approximate MLE and things like that, right? So, and Bayesian methods which are there. So I would recommend if you're interested, reach out to me separately, and we can like have a detailed discussion about how these are accounting for. But these are more, in my opinion, in the realm of computing rather than actuarial science. And strictly speaking, I would be very surprised if this kind of question gets asked, right? So again, like I would not bother about this particular thing. I would just know what these are and just leave it at that, right? Testing of it is something that is very important, and that's something that you should know, right? How do you test the fit of a model, right? Four different types of tests that are there. First one, obviously, is the eye test. You plot the, you visually plot the output of the model. You visually plot the distribution and you verify with your eyes if the distribution and the output of the model is mapping and matching out, right? Second test is obviously chi-square test. Then there is the Kolmogorov-Smirnov test, and then there is the Anderson-Darling test. So this is I specifically thought about putting this, and there's a reason I put this, because there has been one question in the past on the Kolmogorov-Smirnov test that came in the IFO, and that caught out a lot of students. And surprisingly, this was the paper which I gave and I passed, right? So that paper had a pass mark of 50, and it's very, very rare for an IFOA paper to have a pass mark of 50, and that kind of shows how bad that particular diet would have performed for that pass mark to be, crashed down from a 65 to a 50, right? And one of the reasons why the pass mark was so low in that paper was because they asked this random question on Kolmogorov-Smirnov test, and I kind of had to, the only reason I was able to answer that question was because I had quite a little bit of understanding of Kolmogorov-Smirnov from my understanding of Python and data science. So that was one of the reasons why I was able to answer it, right? So very, very unlikely that those kind of questions will come again. However, I would recommend that you guys look at the KS and AD tests just to be on the safer side, right? So I will I will put the question next, and I will tell you how I went about solving it as well, because there's an important nuance that's there, which I kind of, there's a hack over there which I created, right? So I hope you guys will understand it and take it forward. Okay, fine. Chi-square test, simple point. Chi-square distribution test if the null hypothesis is true, and Kolmogorov-Smirnov test is nothing but it tests whether a particular distribution falls into a specified probability distribution. So let's say that you get samples from a distribution, right? And somebody tells you that this is from a normal distribution, and you want to test whether this is actually from a normal distribution, right? That's how you use the Kolmogorov-Smirnov and the Anderson-Darling test to test whether or not this is from the normal distribution. That's about it, right? That test tells you, yes, this is from a normal distribution, and no, this is not from a normal. It's null hypothesis, and alternate H naught and H1 is basically, whether it belongs to a particular distribution, and that's about it, right? So you keep testing. Okay, if it does not belong to the Poisson normal distribution, does it belong to a Poisson distribution? No. Okay, does it belong to a negative binomial? Okay, yes, it belongs to a negative binomial, and hence this, there'll be a confidence interval that is there, and it will tell you whether it belongs to this particular distribution within that confidence interval, right? So how does it do this? It tests the area between the two distribution and checks if the area is the same and if the difference is minimized. So if you see, I've taken a sample from the core reading where it shows the red line is basically the theoretical distribution, and the blue jagged line is the empirical distribution that you've gotten from the samples, right? So it tests whether or not the curves are close together, right? Now, without further ado, the Anderson-Darling is very similar to the Kolmogorov-Smirnov test, but there's more weightage to the tails of the distribution than the expected values of the distribution, right? So AD basically checks for extreme values while KS does not check for extreme values. Is that clear? Or am I boring you guys already?
Yes. Yes.
Clear, yeah.
Yeah.
Trust me, this is the most boring part. It gets fun after this. We're done with the most boring parts. All right. So this is the problematic question that came. I think this was September 2021, right? So this is I'm not going to ask you guys to solve this question, right? But I would urge you guys to take a look at this question. September 2021, question number 9, I think, right? So the question was very simple. Student actuary is given the following random sample of 5 observations from a population, right? And they've given the random samples. Then they say that they use the Kolmogorov-Smirnov test for testing the null hypothesis that the cumulative density function for the population is f of x is equal to 1 minus 1 by 1 plus x power 4. The test statistic is given, which is max of fn of x minus fx, where fn of x is the empirical distribution of the sample size, and they've given the critical values of the test. And the first question is verify whether or not this is like if the hypothesis is true, if the null hypothesis is true, right? So how do you go about this? And let's assume that you have absolutely no idea about Kolmogorov-Smirnov. Can you guys kind of theorize how we would go about it? Like take a stab at what approach you'd use. Like let's assume this is absolutely new to you today, right? So, and assume this is your exam. So how would you go about it? And interestingly, do you know what the f of x is? Like what distribution it is? What is 1 minus 1 by 1 plus x power 4? Okay, it's Pareto. So this is a Pareto curve. Pareto with lambda is equal to 1 and alpha is equal to 4. Or is it alpha is equal to 1 and lambda is equal to 4? I don't remember the exact this thing, but it's a Pareto. Right? Okay. So the first thing that you have to understand is that when you get this kind of a question, right, you're not aiming for full marks. This is clearly a higher order question, right? If you provide enough depth, you will be in a position to clear the answer, right? You'll get a bunch of the marks, a majority of the marks, right? Now, you can clearly see what the test statistic is already given us, right? And what does the Kolmogorov-Smirnov do? It tests whether or not a particular distribution falls within the test statistic, right? So, and they've given levels of significance as well. So, and n is the number of samples over there. So the first step to solving this is to identify what the number is, right? So you have, the level of you have the level of significance, and you plug in 5, which is n, and you get that. You get 1 mark for that automatically. So if this is a 5-mark question, automatically you've gotten 20% of the mark, right? The next step is to obtain f of x calculations, which can be easily done, right? So your entire job is to identify whether f of x is part of the distribution. So f of x has to be calculated. That's another 1 mark over there, right? So out of 5 marks, you've already gotten 2 marks. So even though you don't know what the distribution is, you don't know what the K, you don't know what KS, you don't know how to perform a KS test, right? You've already gotten 2 out of 5 just by doing these 2 things. Clear? So that's how you approach.
What is the value of x when calculating fx?
You have to use the random samples over there. So 1 minus 1 divided by 1 plus 1.6 power 4.
6.
Yeah.
1 plus.
That's it.
Okay.
Use that to calculate the value of fx, right? So you give value of fx, and then what I did was I generated 5 random variables. So this is my method, and I think I got 4 out of 6 or something like that, right? So I didn't get full marks, but I was somewhere there. So the original method involved creating the empirical curve using 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, and 0.8 as the input values, and then create the Fn of x from 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, 0.8, and then calculate Fn of x minus f of x, and then obtain the max of that, and then verify if this number is within before the 1% or the 2.5% or the 5%, and answer the question as, okay, you can say that you can reject the null hypothesis at the 2.5% level of significance. That was the original answer, right? So what I did not know that when I answered the question, right? I did not know that you have to build this empirical curve because let's be frank, no, I doubt if any student would have had the presence of mind in that exam paper to build that empirical curve. Maybe one guy did, I don't know, right? But if you look at the examiner comments, it looks very likely that the majority of them didn't even attempt the question, right? So the point here is attempt the question, right? You know that you will get 1 or 2 marks here and there just by doing random things, right? So the original idea here is I created random, these are uniformly, so the RAN column that you see, right? These are uniformly generated random numbers. And then I created Fn of x for those uniformly generated random numbers. And then I subtracted the 2 to obtain that Fn of x minus f of x. Now, this is wrong. The method that I have done is wrong, right? Because I was supposed to build the empirical curve. So instead of 0.19, it should have actually been 0.2. Instead of 0.52, it should have been 0.4, 0.6, 0.8, and 1, right? That's how that empirical function needs to be built. And then you get the corresponding Fn of x, and then you subtract the 2 to obtain the Fn of x minus f of x, and then you take the max of that and you get the K statistic, which is then checked against the column, right? Which is then checked against the level of significance. Now, given we are operating with one hand behind our back, right? Because you don't know, this nuance does not exist in the textbook at all. This nuance is not something that you use in your work, right? You have no way of knowing this nuance. So the best way for you to do it is obtain some statistic and effectively hack the system a little bit, right? So what do you need? You need other Fn of x. So you just create random variables. And I created this in Excel, and then I subtracted this, and then I got this value, right? And then I use this, and I check this as the, I got the K statistic, and then I use this K statistic to check. So now, regardless of what you get, so let's say that you get a K statistic of 0.79, but the original answer has a K statistic of 0.679 or something like that, right? Now, 0.679 is between 2.5 and 1, which means that the null hypothesis is rejected at a 2.5% level of significance. However, my value is 0.79. And I reject it at a 1% level of significance. Now, even if I write 1% level of significance, you would still get 1 more mark over here just for following the process and coming up with a solution, right? So instead of getting 0, just by doing this in a wrong way, you actually end up getting 2.5, 3 marks, right? So the note that I want to give you guys is that, hello, can you guys hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Yeah. So the lesson that I want to share here is that you might be incorrect, but as long as you follow through and create a full solution, you will not get, you'll get at least part marks, right? And that's what I wanted to explain with this answer. Clear?
Yes.
I
How
hope
did
this is,
you think about f of nx?
how can,
I mean,
repeat it?
how do you think about f of nx?
No,
Function of n.
so Fn of x is provided over here. Look at the test statistic, right? The test statistic is defined as max of absolute value of Fn of x minus f of x, where Fn of x is the empirical distribution function of the sample size n. So now we don't have that information, right? So originally speaking, the answer key, right? It basically said that you have to use 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, 0.8, and 1 to build the Fn of x over here.
Okay.
But then I'll be frank with you. I don't think anybody would have had the presence of mind to use those values.
Yeah.
right? So what I did at that point in exam pressure was I generated 5 random variables, right? And I said, okay, these are 5 random variables. I'm going to use this as a, because I realized that these are also randomly generated variables, right? 0.6, 0.8, 1.2, 1.4. These are also randomly generated variables. So I generated 5 random variables. So it was very simple logic that I used, right? And then I created fn of x and then I subtracted. But the idea here is that the only place where I went wrong was here. And I did not go wrong anywhere else. So I ended up getting partial marks,
Yeah, got it.
right? So,
So,
huh,
so even if you use 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, and so on,
correct.
so do we still use the f of x function to find the values for fn of x?
Yes, yes, you use that because that's the empirical function. Yes.
Then actually, then how does it matter whether you use random or then empirical values? So,
This is something even I don't know. Like I had to, so I had to look at the answer sheet to understand it. And I'll be very clear. This is a little foggy even to me.
right. Okay.
Right. So I like if you look at the examiner reports, some of them they don't have enough details, right? So they just give you
Correct.
the random thing and then they just say this is it, right? And then
Correct.
they say that's it, right? So some of the things, perfect example is yesterday's Bonnet-Ferguson question, right?
Hmm.
If you look at that Bonnet-Ferguson question, there'll be no details. It'll just be the number is there, the table will be there, and then there'll be assumptions, and then the underwriting year loss ratio will be
Correct.
converted to an accident year loss. That's it. There's no other explanation as to how that answer was arrived. So sometimes the examiner reports are not they're not enough detail, right? So, but I'll do one thing. I will come back to you guys. I will sit on this today and I'll come back to you guys on how they got it, right? So let me try to crack that understanding as to why 0.2, 0.4 were used and why not a random variable was used, even though I got the same answer.
Sure. Yeah.
Clear?
Yes.
All right, sir. Okay. So before we move to solving questions, let us look at a couple of pros and cons. And this is something that gets asked a lot in pricing SP8 subjects, right? What are the pros and cons of frequency severity? What are the pros and cons of burning cost? In fact, this also gets asked to a certain extent as a simple question in essay 3. So it's very, very important in my opinion to understand and get drilled on what is what, right? So first simple point, frequency severity. What are the advantages of using the frequency severity model is that it underlies the underlying process. It mirrors the underlying process, right? So if you look at claims are split into 3 main buckets, which is frequency, severity, claims handling expenses. And frequency and severity are the biggest component. Claims handling expenses is a very small component of claim, right? So if I am modeling frequency separately and severity separately, it gives me the ability to understand the underlying process of claims, right? So I can separately model them and I can separately come to a conclusion as to which is what and which is what, right? So is frequency a big matter or is severity a big matter? And that's very important in understanding and deploying a viable solution, right? You can use frequency severity model to model complex insurance structures. And this is usually the go-to approach. If you go to any average insurer in India today, there's a very high probability that you will run into a frequency severity model. Not many insurers use GLMs. Maybe that is changing over the past 2-3 years. I have not been in touch with some insurers over the past 2-3 years. Maybe it's changed over the past 2-3 years, but as late as 2019, 2020, not many of them used frequency, complex GLMs or any machine learning models or things like that, right? Very few of them use. I know for a fact that there are a couple of insurers who are based out of Bangalore who use it. There's one based out of Bombay who uses it. So I know there are a couple in the Indian market who use GLMs, right? Aggressively so. And it helps them create, like, identify profitable pools of portfolio risks that they can insure and things like that. But by and large, a majority of Indian insurers today still rely on plain severity frequency models to create, model, and identify pricing, right? And it's not only just in India, across the world also. frequency and severity models are primarily used by a lot of parties today, right? For example, when you launch a new product, you have no data to rely on, and you have to underlie and model the frequency and severity of the claim and arrive at a burning cost to arrive at the price. So this is your starting, right? This is your first step towards pricing. So if you want to become an accomplished pricing actuary, you have to master the art of using frequency severity and understand the difference between using one over the other. All right. When do you use one? When do you use the other? What are the advantages of this? What are the disadvantages of this? Why do you use this? Why do you not use this? Right. So there is for every single case, there's a use case for every single method, and you have to understand and you have to nuance that use case, right? So one of the other pros, apart from modeling complex insurance structures, is that you can get additional insight because of the separation of frequency and severity, and it also helps in understanding trends and identifying trends. So for example, you can identify separate trends for frequency and severity if you build an FS model, right? So you can identify that, okay, severity has been reducing, but frequency has been increasing. So the burning cost might be stable over the past, say, 6 months. But that burning cost stability could be due to increasing frequency and decreasing severity, right? And this additional insight is something that is very helpful to actuaries to plan and change. So for example, if I want to reduce my frequency, I have to do a couple of things. If I want to change my severity, I have to do a couple of things. So this helps you understand that. Main disadvantages of this method, obviously very data heavy. You need to have a lot of data points to get to frequency severity models. Assessing distributions might be very onerous. It is definitely more time consuming than a simple cut and dry burning cost model. And there is a certain level of expertise that is required for frequency severity modeling over burning cost approaches. So that's something that is definitely there. And that's something that you have to understand when you're trying to build this out. Okay. Questions?
What could be the
No,
major difference of not using, what could be the major reason of not using GLM and using frequency severity? Is it because GLM requires much more data than frequency severity, or is it because of the computational power which GLM needs or expertise?
I would say all of them are factors for not using GLM, and all of them are factors for using frequency severity, right? The first point with respect to GLM is that a rule of thumb. It's not a accurate rule, right? But it's a rule of thumb that generally gets followed. If you have 150,000 exposure data points over 2 years, not 150,000 total, 150,000 per year for 2 years, then the rule of thumb is basically that you have enough data to adequately build a GLM model. So that's the data requirement for GLMs, right? It's not a hard and fast rule. Even with 1,000 policies, you can build a GLM. Nothing stops you from building a GLM, right? What is GLM? A GLM is nothing but a higher level mathematical representation of frequency and severity. That's it, right? There is a distributional assumption that we discussed that gets made, and it's a regression model. It's a generalized approach to OLS regression, right?
Yeah.
There is nothing special about a GLM model. You can build a GLM model even if you have 1,000 data points. Nothing stops you from building it. You can build a TensorFlow data science model, right? You can build a machine learning model also using 1,000 data. I have done it, right? Nothing stops you from doing it, right? It is just that it is not going to be accurate, right? There's going to be overfitting. There are a lot of factors. There are a lot of problems that come with it, right? That's one aspect. Second aspect, obviously, is also expertise, right? GLM expertise is not very prevalent in the market, right? For you to build expertise takes time, and for you to build a know-how of the software as well takes time, right? So if you want to build a GLM today, it's not very simple, right? You have to either build it on Emblem, which is a licensed software, which means there's a cost associated to the company on building on getting or obtaining this thing, or you have to build it on Python, right? Or R, for example, right? Which means you have to learn coding. right? So that level of expertise you need to get, right? And if you are doing the coding yourself, you also have to do the data cleaning yourself. And data cleaning is a very onerous job, which is very, very problematic, right? So there is a joke that all the data scientists, right, only 1% of their time is actually spent on actual building the model. And 99% of the time is actually spent on cleaning the data, right? Because there is so much dirtiness in the data that you have to keep cleaning the data. And I have done this before and I can attest to it that yes, it is true that 90 to 95% of your time as a pricing actuary will go into data cleaning and nothing else, because that is the biggest area of concern for any actuary, pricing actuary out there, right? So that expertise should be there, right? And that is one of the reasons why frequency, severity, and burning cost models are preferred, because at the end of the day, you can do this in Excel.
Yeah.
So imagine this, right? Do you want to do this or do you want to do an Excel model? And that is where the practicality and materiality aspect comes into play, right? Is it practical to build a GLM model? Maybe. Is it material? Maybe. So that's where calls take, right? So that and one of the things that you have to do as an actuary is also to make a recommendation. So you have to identify whether a GLM is really necessary, and that can come only with experience, right? It can come only with when you have worked on these a little bit and you understand the pros and cons of each model. That's when you can make a solid recommendation to your company as well, saying that, boss, we don't need a GLM model for this, right? A GLM model is not going to help us. We are better off with a frequency severity model, and it's easier for us to do this. These are the reasons, right? So that is where your expertise comes into play, right? At least from a business perspective. So that's how people will ask you. People will rely on you for this particular. That's how they will ask you when you become qualified actuaries, if I may say so.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
No problems. All right. So burning cost, pros and cons. Again, you can flip the pros and cons of frequency severity and you can arrive at the pros and cons of burning cost. So simplest thing is it's simple, right? Data requirements are not onerous. You can do something very quickly, and it allows you to price for individual risk, which is very important. Frequency severity is not very suitable for individual risks. Burning cost is much, much easier. Biggest cons, harder to spot trends, like I mentioned, right? Burning cost could be stable, but the reason for that stability could be reducing frequency and increasing severity, or vice versa, right? So you will not be able to identify that trend. Adjusting past data is a little difficult with burning cost models. Very crude. It's a very crude approach at the end of the day. And again, changes to cover might be difficult to model. Perfect example, if I have burning cost data, I might be able to make a change if there's a change in deductible. But if there's a change in the underlying cover, the perils involved or something like that might be very difficult to model, right? Whereas if there's a frequency severity model, I can split the data by peril. I can get the frequency data by peril, and then I can do it from the ground up. So it's very difficult if there's only a burning cost model. Clear?
Yes.
All right. Now let's go to a couple of burning cost questions, right? Very important. If you get it in the question exam, you will get it for about 10 to 15 marks, which is a big chunk in my opinion. So let's focus the rest of the class on understanding this, right? So I'm not going to give you guys like so this is because this is very important, right? Look at this. There are two questions over here, right? The first one is to estimate the risk premium. The second one is to outline other items of information that may be helpful in refining the risk premium. Now, if you remember in the last class, I had given you one whimsical, right? And I told that particular whimsical, which had the other influences, is going to be one of the most important slides that you can refer to, right? This is the reason why, right? So these are there'll always be a question right after calculation of risk premium. There'll always be a question on what are the additional information that is required for you as an actuary to get the office premium, right? So So make sure that you go to back to that slide and make sure that you read through that slide and make sure those details are clearly well understood by you, right? So okay, let's go one by one, right? Let's first take a look at the risk premium. So let's first calculate the risk premium. Let's take maybe 10 to 15 minutes to solve that. I'll give you guys 10 to 15 minutes. Although if you want more, I'll give you more time, because the idea here is to build the muscle now so that at a later point during the exam, if you get this question, you can do it within 5 minutes, right? These questions are time savers for you. If it is seven marks, you can spend at most 14 minutes, right? But if you get these questions, you should be able to finish these questions in under 5 minutes. In pricing, these questions are all time savers for you, right? Initially, it might be appear daunting, but trust me, after you solve 2 questions, you will be very comfortable, right? And then you will actually like solving these questions. So first question, I'm not going to time it. I'm giving you 10 to 15 minutes. If you want more after 15 minutes, I can give it to you as well. Not an issue, right? So read through the question and estimate the risk premium. Do you have any questions before you start? Have you guys started already?
As of now, no questions from me.
Okay. I mean, if you guys have started, then just let me know. And if you finish also, if you can just send the answer on chat and I can verify it immediately. If you have any questions during the solving also, please feel free to ask. I can answer immediately.
I'm done with risk premium part.
You can
I have pasted. I've-
little low. I think your selection of burning cost might be, you didn't trend for it, I suppose.
just a moment. I think I made a
Did you take
mistake.
the average burning cost?
No. That was some mistake.
Sunil, I can tell you the process I followed, but not sure I'm doing it
You can
correct.
just send it to me on chat and I can verify it.
The process or the number?
Just send the process, I'll verify it.
Okay.
Yeah. Ankur, I think it's very
No, I got it. What mistake I did.
again low. Much lower. There's a market difference. It's not within my levels of significance in my opinion. But Vidhi, I think you have an issue with the number of years.
So first year adjusted for like 5 years, then 4, then 3, and then 2, and
That's
then 1.
correct. But, you're talking about year 6 and 7. I think the
For
question,
the exposure.
but the question is only for year 6, no?
So I take the average of 6 and because policies incept throughout the year, so I took the average of average policy inception would be middle of the year, so I took the average of 6 and 7.
No, I think your exposure calculation might be off, Vidhi. 1 minute.
Oh, okay.
Your exposure calculation, I think you have to recheck.
Okay.
What is the...
I think I'm not trended for exposure at all.
Ankit, your exposure is off.
Yeah.
Your exposure is off. Your method otherwise seems correct only. I think your method is... minute.
No, exposure I have not
Yeah,
trended.
your ultimate numbers, your ultimate claim figures are correct, but exposure is completely off.
Yeah. I have not trended the exposure.
Yeah, your risk premium is off because of that. Not only because of that, but yeah, I think there needs to be another step that you have not taken. Even Vidhi, you also missed one step.
Exposure trending.
No,
That would-
not exposure trending, but how do you obtain the burning cost for year 6? That is something that you have not accounted for in your method. Yours is also, Ankit, yours is also a little incorrect.
Mhm.
Mm.
So we can take the same assumption for exposure trending as inflation. I am not sure.
No, exposure calculation is something that's separate. So for exposure calculation, I would urge you to read the question once more. Read the question fully. Look at the data. Every point, every word in that question has a meaning. So you are talking about exposure in terms of number of vans, right?
Yes.
The first question is exposure is the number of vans at the start of the year. The exposure
Yes.
column. The exposure column is number of vans at the start of the year. However, they are talking about the number of vans at the start of year 6 is expected to be 245 and 275 at the start of year 7, right? So now you know the number of vans that they're going to buy in the year. So there is a nuance over here where you have to calculate. You have the number of vans at the start of the year. You have number of vans at the end of the year. You have the number of vans that are bought in the middle of the year. And now you have to use this information to calculate the actual exposure. Am I making sense?
How do I
Yeah.
calculate actual exposure?
Okay. No, we'll see that. We'll see that. So if you can't do this in the exam, right? Make assumptions, right?
Okay.
Just you will lose marks for sure. You will lose marks, but you'll
Right.
not end up with a 0, right? So that's more important. So for sure you'll lose marks. Like you lose a lot of marks because the key over here is to calculate the exposure, right? Ultimate claims is something that you can easily calculate. Everybody will get it right. Right? The differentiator between past and, in my opinion, this is a personal opinion, difference here is how do you calculate the exposure accurately, right? So that's where a lot of this will hinge on, right? But if you cannot, then you fare the same, right? Make assumptions and just finish the paper, right? So finish the question because you can collect a couple of marks here and there. Ankur. So we'll see that, Vidhi. We'll see that. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
The idea is to make mistakes now. Make as many mistakes now as possible. Ankur, are you trying again?
No, so other than that exposure part, the average exposure, other than that, I didn't see any issue with my calculation.
Okay.
So maybe we can move ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Ankit, shall we move ahead with the answer?
Yes. Yes.
All right. So step number 1 obviously is calculating the exposure, right? Now, how do you calculate the exposure? You have vans at the beginning. So this data, the data point that is mentioned here is vans at the start of the year, right? Now, if I have 125 at the start of year 2, it means that I have 125 at the end of year 1.
Yes.
Start of
Yeah.
year, end of year
Yeah.
1, right?
Yeah.
So I got this idea because they have specifically mentioned over here, the number of vans at the start of year 6 is expected to be 245 and 275 at the start of year 7, which basically means that they're giving you how many you are going to get at the end of year 6, right? So now you have number of vans at the beginning of the year, number of vans at the end of the year. Now, if you assume that the vans that are purchased are going to be evenly purchased over the year, I can calculate my exposure to be, the equation for exposure is vans at the beginning of the year plus new vans purchased divided by 2. So in year 1, I will purchase 26 vans, right? And I add that to 99, I get 100 and something for 1 minute. Just hold on. I'll just explain what my logic is. I made some 6 vans, 99. How is this?
The average of both the years.
It's the average, yeah.
It's the average. Sorry. Yes.
Average of both
The
the
average.
years.
The average of
Yeah.
the 2 years. Sorry. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Right? So I get the average of the 2 years, and that is my exposure. Clear? So I've got the exposure. I've got the exposure for year 6 as well. Right? Now, what I do is
that only I do. Yeah.
now I trend the claims to ultimate. This, I don't think there's any problem. Right?
Yes.
And once I trend the claims to ultimate, I will calculate the burning cost. Now, the most important aspect over here is when you get burning cost, you have to understand the trend in the burning cost. Right? Look at the trend in the burning cost. Over 5 years, the burning cost has gone from 70 to 102. right?
Right.
It's showing an increase every year. Year on year, there is an increase. 70, 76, 84, 93, 102. This is where, Ankit, you had made that this thing, right? You reverted back to 97. You have no
Yes.
information. You cannot revert that, right? Because what information do you have to revert to revert a trend in the burning cost that you're seeing? There is no information. So you would have lost a lot of marks there.
Yes.
Even I did the same.
That's
So
why
I basically took the average burning cost of 5 years.
yeah, that's why I told you, Ankur, when you saw it itself, I said there's a problem with your trending, right? There's an incorrect trend that you're applying. Always watch out for the trend in burning cost. Now, if the burning cost is upper niche here and there, then you can do an average. Let's say the burning cost was 102, 94, 101, 97, and then 105. Then there is no trend over there. So you can then take an average. Should not be a problem. However, when there's a clear trend, you have to identify what there's an additional nuance that you have to add where you have to identify trend. And here the idea is you have to trend the burning cost by 10% because roughly speaking, the burning cost increases by 10%. So look at the division. 76 divided by 70 is 9.2%. 84 divided by 76 is 9.8%. 93 divided by 84 is 10%. 102 divided by 93, 10.2%. So you can just then say that burning cost on average is increasing by 10% year on year. So my next year's burning cost will also be 10% higher than 102, which comes to 112.75. And then use that to calculate the risk premium, which is 29,350. Clear? The challenge, there are two challenges here in this question that you have to look out for. First challenge obviously is calculation of exposure. Second challenge obviously is trending of burning cost. Those are the two biggest pitfalls in any of these kind of questions, right? Calculation of exposure, trending of burning cost. If you get those two right, you will get full marks. Okay.
Yeah.
Now let's go to the next question. 5 marks.
Just a question.
Sure, tell me.
Actually, why I didn't use the trending, because we had already adjusted for inflation. So once adjusted for inflation, ideally it should give like to like number.
No, not necessarily. No, there are other drivers for frequency as well, right? You are only accounted for one factor, inflation, in your trend. Now, there could be so many factors. There could be changes to policy terms and conditions. There could be changes to risk management practices. There could be changes to frequency. There could be changes to severity, right? For example, perfect example, what if the burning cost was increasing because they started? So look at this. This is a practical question. They had 99 cars 5 years ago, 99 vans. Now they have 225 vans, right? They have grown. How much have they grown by? They have grown by about 10% year on year, roughly 10%, 15% year on year. It's a good growth for a company, right? Now, when you're growing at that faster pace, these guys, instead of initially, they might have had stringent qualifications for drivers, but it might have been very difficult to get good drivers. So they would have started getting poor quality drivers. And that could be one of the reasons why the burning cost has been increasing, because you have poorer drivers who are creating more accidents, right? So you have to think like that. That is the level of thinking that you have to bring for this question to crack this question. Because the next part, that's exactly what they're asking. They're asking exactly this question, right? The question is outline other information that may be helpful in identifying and refining the risk premium estimated in part 1. Now you have obtained the risk premium. They're asking you what other information do you need as an actuary to obtain a refined value for risk premium, right? So this is the question. This is the thinking. And this question, you have to contextually provide answers. You cannot provide generic answers. So you have to contextually think about the particular question, the particular situation that is there, and you have to provide answers, and that will carry more weight. And that's how you get more than, say, 4 marks in this particular type of question. You can give generic answers. The examiner report will also have generic answers. You can give them, but you need to generate a lot more. But if you can provide contextual answers, that provides depth, right? So I've given you one such scenario. I've given you maybe 1 or 2 marks already, right? But I want you guys to try anyways. outline other information that might be helpful in refining the risk premium. So try this. I will give you guys 5 minutes. And guys, FYI, my method also gives the same answer. 125 minus 99 divided by 2 plus 99 gives the
So
same.
that's the same. That's the same as average.
Same thing. Yeah. Sorry. I got confused because that's the logic that I used and I really got confused. Done, guys?
Yeah.
All right. So let's hear your answers. Just hold on. Let me take a pen and paper and let me take down your answers so that we can have a discussion. Okay. So let's start. Tell me your answers. Who wants to go first?
I can go.
Go on.
The first would be the claim counts for each year to better understand the frequency and severity trends separately, and maybe we can use the frequency severity model if need be.
Okay.
If there are any changes in policy terms and conditions like deductibles over the past years.
Okay.
Also, if there are any changes expected in the next year.
Okay.
Similarly, if there is any RI treaty, and if yes, then details of the same to calculate the proper RI loadings.
Okay.
And if any RI treaty change is expected over the subsequent year.
Okay.
So details of large claims over past years. Also the details of CAT losses over past years, so that we could make appropriate adjustments for same. Yeah, so these are the main points that I could think of.
Okay. All right. Ankit?
Yeah, changes in the mix of business,
All right.
if any one-off losses which has skewed the losses for any of the years, which should be known.
All right.
Then changes in terms and conditions, like has there been any NCD or changes in excess along with the deductibles which Ankur mentioned. We
Good.
can mention that. Competitor pricing and the level of competition, basically, whether it has been increasing and what the competitor pricing has been. But this could be a part of office premium, I think.
Okay.
Then underwriting cycle, which might have led to the changes in the claims incurred,
Okay.
and the different types of claims to better understand if there has been any reporting or settlement delays for any particular year.
Okay.
And a key point was that inflation has been assumed to be constant for the entire period of 2%. So we have to check whether it's the same or not,
Good.
as that will materially impact the ultimate claims.
Good. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Vidhi?
So I got little confused whether the loadings would be the part of risk premium because
No,
it
it's
is
not.
the expected cost of claim.
No.
It's not,
Risk
right?
premium is
Okay.
different. Office premium is different. Loadings, risk premium
Yeah,
loadings equal to office premium.
office premium. Okay. So I have written certain assumptions but couldn't go through much. But
It's okay. Go
the
for it.
one is one is like we have assumed that the ultimate claims is the proportion of the claims developed. So I need my estimates for the case reserves.
Okay.
Then what is the type of the claim and the reason for the claim, and so again the inflation part, that the future inflation, we have assumed that future inflation is equal to the past inflation,
Okay.
and assuming the exposure is spread evenly throughout the year,
Okay.
and on the claim settlement, whether the claims are settled uniformly,
Right.
and yeah, terms and conditions policy are already covered. So yeah.
All right. Okay. Fine. All right. So one important point which a lot of you guys missed is the question here, right? The question specifically asks for outline information that may be helpful in refining risk premium estimated in part 1, which means that you guys cannot talk about loadings. So that entire point of Ankur about RI treaty, that's correct if it is office premium. If they had said, what other information do you want to arrive at an office premium? You are absolutely right, Ankur. You would have gotten full marks. But you have to read the question twice, thrice, 4 times, right? And you have to understand that They're very particular about the question, especially IFOA, right? And if you stray away from the exact thing that they're asking you, they will cut marks or they will not give you a lot of marks, right? Your points on changes in terms and conditions, those are all absolutely accurate when you talk about risk premium. That's correct, right? When Vidhi was talking about the type of claims, ultimate claims, whether the reserving proportion of claims developed, all that was very accurate because that impacts the risk premium, right? For example, if the proportion of claims developed for the first year is not 98%, and if it is say 97%, that will impact the risk premium that you arrive at, right? So those are the things that you have to think through, right? And from a understanding perspective, information about the client is something that you have to understand, right? So the question that I mentioned, right? Has there been a dilution of drivers? That is an understanding level question on the risk premium itself. If the driver quality has not, has gone for a toss, then you have a problem you can refine your risk premium by taking this thing, right? So first, when you arrive at the question, always read through the question and make sure that your answers are on point, because all your answers that you have given are absolutely right. The problem is they are answering another question altogether. They're not answering the question that was given to you, right? So every point that was said, mix of business, changes in terms and conditions, correct. Underwriting cycle, competition pricing, what else is there? The claim counts for each year is a good point. Exposure is spread evenly. I don't think that's a valid assumption, Vidhi. But those points that you mentioned, right? Those are all
assumptions.
Office premium. Those are all office premiums. And secondly, one more point is you guys have to start generating more points, right? So 5 points, 7 points, not enough. So you have to start generating more points. So start thinking through more areas that you can hit and more things that you can generate, because at the end of the day, assume that you're not going to get 1 mark per point, right? Assume you're only going to get 0.5 marks per point, and you have to have a pad of at least 2 points to get the full score, right? So you have to look at, if it's a 5 marker, you have to generate at least 12 points to be on the safe side.
Can we include distribution channel or method of sales policy?
Does that impact the risk premium?
It impacts the exposure.
No, it impacts the risk premium. You have to understand, right? So it impacts exposure, yes. However, this is an independent policy that has come, right? It's come through a broker. The distribution channel is already set over there.
Oh,
right? It's coming through a broker. The question says it's been provided by a broker, which means the distribution channel is already set, which means you can't use that. You are right. It affects the office premium. If it came by a direct agent and not a broker, you don't have to pay commissions, and that impacts office premium. You're right. The problem is it doesn't impact risk premium, right? The distribution channel does not impact risk premium. Risk premium is what are the components of risk premium? It is frequency, it is severity. That is the risk premium, right? Even exposure to a certain extent is, because you're calculating it at you're dividing the whole thing, right? Burning cost is what? Divided by exposure. You're removing exposure out of the equation, right? So your components are frequency and severity, which means this question is asking what are the factors that you need about frequency and severity that will give you more information to refine your answer. So instead of coming up at 29,000, can you come up at some different figure? What will make you question? What about the frequency and severity will make you question the 29,000? Will make you say, oh shit, this number is wrong. I need to do something else to get that number, right? That is what the question is asking. That's why I'm spending a lot of time on this, because this question, everybody gets caught up on this question. Everybody gets caught up because you would have just solved this question, right? And it's mathematical in nature. You'll be excited once you solve this question, because that's how this question is structured, right? You generally tend to get excited the moment you get the answer. You know that it's there. You will not read the next question. And generally that's how they add this. This is a trap, right? So when you finish this question, always search for this trap, always read through the question 2 times, 3 times, understand the question, and then solve the question, right? So answer, again, I made a mistake over here by adding, I think I added competition incorrectly, right? Competition is not a right question, right? So competition was not a right point over there. But look at this, right? So understand the impact of large claims. Get more information on large claims because we don't have data on large claims here, right? Understand, have there been large claims? Now, if there have been large claims that impact your burning cost, right? Understand whether there have been CAT claims because CAT claims will impact burning cost again, right? Breakdown of claims by peril. Somebody had mentioned claims breakdown, right? That's a good point, right? Then there is changes in terms and conditions. Understand whether there have been changes in the terms and conditions. And analyze why the burning cost has increased. Is it because of a change in claims handling? Is it because of change in propensity? Is it because of a change in driving quality? Understand all those factors, right? Identify territories and countries where they are planning on, are they operating in the same territory and country, or are they expanding? Are they operating in different countries? So simple example, right? Have they only been in Maharashtra, or now are they going into Tamil Nadu and Jammu and Kashmir and Himachal Pradesh, where the risk profile is going to be different, right? Identify information about the insured that could affect risk. For example, ask questions on experience of drivers. Ask questions on nature of items. Have they changed the nature of items they're delivering? For example, have they gone from delivering household goods to hazardous chemicals, which increases the risk of the accidents that are there for the drivers, right? Uh, Ask questions about risk management practices. Are they, for example, not servicing the vehicles? Now, if they don't service the vehicle's quality will degrade. And over time, it becomes more dangerous. And if it becomes more dangerous, it's more prone to accidents, which increases the frequency, right? So these are the, and have there been regulatory or legislative changes, or are there going to be any regulatory or legislative changes that are going to materially impact the risk premium, right? So always answer the question in terms of the exact, like, search for the trap that they're looking for, right? So they've sprung a trap. Make sure you don't fall into the trap. Okay, let's solve one more question, and I think this time it should be much easier. Look at the format. It's the same format. There is a question for 6-7 marks. Then there's another follow on for 3-4 marks, right? That is generally the format that they'll be there. So make sure that you're aware of this format. I think this should be a slightly easier question. Remember to use every piece of information that has been given to you. If you're done, you can post it on chat and I can verify the number for you. Very high. Very high. It's almost double the answer.
Wow.
All right. Vidhi,
How do I send? Yeah, okay.
you can send it. That will be easier.
Only the total, the final risk premium.
The final is fine. That will help me understand where you
Okay.
like where you. No, your risk premium cannot be this low. The answer is
Not,
in, yeah, the answer is in millions.
so this is in millions.
No,
Then
no.
change it. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's
Okay.
you're off by an order of magnitude, you're off. 1 minute. Give me like the steps that you followed. Maybe I think what you've done is you might have missed a multiplication somewhere. Your ultimates.
So remove 1.03 and then the other 3 point, yeah.
Your ultimates are more or less correct. Your ultimates are right. So you're there. Your ultimates are correct, but I think you only taken attritional claims. So what about your large claims?
Added there. So this is separate.
This is
I'll-
separate.
Yeah.
Yeah, your large claims are also somewhat okay only. I think somewhere you made a multiplication mistake. Like
Okay.
like you've taken a wrong order of magnitude, which resulted in somewhere there's a multiplication mistake for you. 2017. What is the 0.001205?
Risk premium.
No, that is wrong. I think that's
I did claim by total exposure.
yeah, that is yes. But somewhere I feel like there is a mistake.
I'm not sure about the treatment of large claims. I shared the answer.
Hold
I
on.
mean,
Your turnover is correct. Tended is correct. Ultimates are not correct. One ultimate is correct, but the other one it doesn't seem to be right.
yeah.
No, your final step is wrong.
Yeah, I figured that.
Yeah, your
But
final step is wrong. How you treat large claims is incorrect.
yeah, I know that we have to remove it from the total
You have to
claims.
remove it and then you have to add it back at a later point. But the way you've done it is you
Yeah,
added it back,
it's the
but you
same-
added it back in
Is the same way as to
we-
not
we-
remove it.
you're more than 2x the number. Okay.
Oh,
You're more than 2x the number. You've gone from the other end now.
no, I didn't multiply it with the turnover
Okay.
after 5% growth.
Yeah. Okay. You're more than 2x the number.
Okay, now I'll wait for the
See, generally speaking, right, there is a element of what do you say? There's no right answer, right? So let's say the answer is 7.8 million. If you get 7.6 million, generally you'll get full marks, right? Or you'll get close to full marks. But then instead of 7.8, if you give 15, then obviously, like you'll be penalized quite heavily. So it's fine. It's fine. Good
Oh,
attempt.
no, I got my mistake.
Okay, good. Let's correct it and then let's see whether Vidhi correct it.
$8.12.
Very close. Very close. Very close to the right number. Pretty close. You're off by about $300,000, which is fine. So the right answer is 7.8 million.
Oh.
I mean, not right, but yeah, one one valid answer.
Mm, I got 7.93 now.
Oh, good. You are now $100,000 off. More accurate. Chalo. Shall we go to the answer?
Yeah.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay. Chalo. So first step, I think everybody got the first step, right? Which is the calculation of the exposure for 2021, right? Which is 6660. You get that by multiplying 6343 by 1.05, right? Or 5%. So that was correct. What you have to also, I think what everybody got right was splitting the attritional claims and large claims, right? So you have to, they've given large claim data, they've given attritional claims data, and you split it. And now the bigger thing that you have to do is you have to model them separately. Now, the biggest assumption here is that the inflation rate provided is the same for large claim and attritional claims. Generally speaking, do large claims follow the same inflation rate as attritional claims? Not necessarily, right? Large claims generally have their own inflation rates, and they have a separate inflation index that they generally follow, right? And that's for various reasons. But one assumption that you have to make is that large claims and attritional claims have the same inflation rates, right? Because they've only given you one inflation rate. You can also say that large claims follow a higher inflation rate, and then, okay, but you'll probably lose marks if you do that. Don't try to over-engineer the situation. Play to the strengths of the question, right? Now, trend claims to the ultimate positions. I think everybody got this right. I don't think there is any requirement to answer or stop here. Next question is calculating the burning cost. Now, this is where I think a lot of people went wrong. For example, Ankit,
Go a
yeah,
bit up.
you should not. So what you did was you added the burning cost together.
Yes.
You calculated the large
Let's
claim
go to
burning cost. You
step
calculated the
2.
large claim burning cost and then additional claims burning cost, and then you added it together, right? That defeats the purpose of large claims.
Yeah. I figured that out. Can you move to step 2 once? I think I made a mistake there.
You made a mistake for the other 4.79. Sorry, I think you didn't trend the large claim, the second large claim.
Yeah.
The second large claim that you showed, I think you took it as 4 million and then you inflated it.
Yes.
But it can't be 4 million. No, you have to account for the development of the large claim.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You have to develop the large claim. That was where I think you went off, right?
Yeah.
So once you do this, what will happen is that once you get the ultimates and once you get the burning cost, you have to get the burning cost for attritional claims, right? Get the burning cost for attritional claims and get the risk premium for attritional claims, and then add a large claim loading. A large claim loading is nothing but the average over 5 years. So you have 5 years of data, you have 2 large claims. Just average it, you get one large claim loading, you add that large claim loading to the risk premium, and that's the answer.
Oh, yeah.
What I did wrong is I didn't inflate the large claims, and also I read in one of the questions the growth that they applied. So sometimes they do it half of the year. That is the middle of the year. So I initially took 5%, then I took 2.5%.
So here you have all accident years or all underwriting years for this. So you don't have to do that half the year, middle of the year, because everything it'll add up.
On the same.
Even I did the same.
No. You don't have to take half year, middle year, because even your analysis period is the same, right? So
Correct.
Yeah, let's say you start at 2014 and then you're doing it for 2021. It's the same underwriting year cohort or the same accident year cohort. So you don't have to make that change. It's fine. You can about it. Cool. Clear?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think this was faster, right? You were able to get at an answer faster in the second try. And that's the logic over here. You do 2 more questions, and by the time you do your 5th question, you'll be well versed in this, right? You will no longer have to struggle with this question, right? So if you can go back couple of years question papers, just pick it up, every question paper from 2014 to 2012, in fact, they'll have one question on this. Just take that question and solve that question. And by the time you get to the fifth or sixth question, I kid you not, it will take you less than 5 minutes to solve these questions, right? And also, please do not forget the most important aspect. When you are writing this question, you have to finish one important thing, and that is the assumptions. Please make sure you write them down. It will give you 2 to 2.5 marks. If you don't write it down, you would have got 7.9 million Vidhi, but if you don't write this, you will get only 5 marks. You are losing 2 marks, right? So after doing all that work, after doing all that practice, after doing all those, countless hours of things, and then only for you to lose 2 important marks in something which you could have easily gotten is, trust me, a very heart-burning and painful condition. I have gone through it myself, right? So I'm talking to you, not like as this thing. I'm talking to you as a fellow student who's done this mistake and who's felt bad about it afterwards, right? So don't be in a position where you feel bad about it, right? Whenever you get a question in any question paper, in anything, always jot your assumptions down, right? Jot it down as and when you are writing the exam, because these are very important, and this will help you get that final go over the edge, right? So all right, clear. Any questions?
One question.
Tell
So
me.
let's say if we don't develop large laws,
Ah,
but if we mention that in the assumptions, then it is fine, right?
it is, you will not get 7 out of 7, but yes,
Acha.
they will penalize probably a mark or two, but you will not get, you will not lose heavily. So if you don't trend large losses, and if you don't mention it, probably they'll cut, say, 2.5 marks, but if you mention it, they might cut only like a mark. But you never know. They might say, okay, it might be as low as 0.5 marks, depending on how other students have performed. Like, for example, let's say that no student in this thing has given a right answer to this, but you have given the closest wrong answer. You will get more marks. So there is an element of how others have performed as well in this nuance.
Oh.
But yeah, you have to state it. So you stating it gives you brownie points. Your the assumptions, all those things, these are just brownie points, by the way. It's to tell the examiner that you've thought of this when you're writing the answer. That's it. Why do you state these assumptions? Inflation continues at 3% per annum. Turnover inflation is 0. Why are you writing them down? You're writing them down to tell the examiner that, boss, yes, see, I have also thought of these things. So I have given you a rounded answer. That's all. The answer that I have given accounts for these things. That's all you're telling them. All right. Next question. Suggest further information the pricing actuary may request from the firm to refine the estimated risk premium. Please go through the trap again. So this time it's only for 3 marks. So it's good enough if you suggest 6 to 8 decent suggestions, common sense suggestions. If you suggest 6 to 8 common sense suggestions, you should be in the team. Done, guys? So let's see quickly.
Where's the geographical location of where the two new offices are
Good.
being opened?
Okay.
Any more expectations on the large losses?
Okay.
And what is the reason for these two large losses?
Okay.
The qualification of the architect and the number of architects employed by the Gober firm.
Okay.
The reason for no excess being applied on the policy, and
Okay. Very good.
introduction of any excess or deductible can reduce my claim amount, so it can lower my frequency.
Good.
Only this much I can think of.
Okay. Ankit, Ankur.
I think other than what BT said, the only one additional point was the claim counts as well.
Claim count. Good. All right. Ankit.
I think very good points were covered by Vidhi. I missed few of them. Other than that, I think the status of the claims, particularly the large claims, whether closed or not, so that trending may not be required.
Very good.
The inflation in turnover, or whether it's changing or
Very
not changing. The probability of reopening of the claims, because it's a indemnity cover,
good.
liability cover, so there are chances that the claims in the past could have opened and that could have inflated the amounts.
Very good.
Any cat events, highly unlikely for this class, so may not fetch marks, I feel.
You have to talk about not cat events. You have to talk about latent claims.
Latent, I thought so about latent
So when it
claims,
comes
but
to
I did
liability,
not
talk
write.
about latent claims. When it comes to liability, talk about latent claims. When it comes to property, talk about cat events. This is simple. But good point. Very good point. Even these guys can also get cat events, by the way. Their definition of cat is different.
Yeah,
You can make the claim for cat events. They are not subject to not being exposed to cat events. Right? Liability.
Not God's that God. What do you say that? God.
Act of God. No. So
Act
cat
of
does
God
not
may
mean
not be
cat
act of God.
events. So cat events does not mean act of God. No. Terrorism is a cat event.
Yeah,
It's an act of God.
exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
depends. But yeah, very good.
One more point was the changes in regulations.
Good.
Which could change the court awards and it could inflate the historical losses.
Very good point.
Yeah.
All of you guys gave very good points, very solid points in my opinion. I think the only downside is not enough points. So make sure you have, if it's a 3 marker, make sure you have at least 6 solid points, 8 to be on the safer side. Very good point. For example, qualification of architects, reopening of claims is actually a good point. Status of claim is also a good point. Number of claims is a good point. All good points. The only downside that I'm seeing is you guys are getting the quality. You also have to get quantity. So that's the only challenge. I think you should get it by just practice. You should be in a position to get it, right? Let's look at the answers just once so that you guys also see. So for example, from growth forecast, types of work that the architects undertake. So you have got, Vidhi, you came to that point where you're talking about the architects, right? So not just number of architects, also the type of works. Do they work on malls, government installations, houses, whatever, right? Now you're talking about architects. One knockoff point is, what is the experience of the architects? Number of architects, experience of the architects, right? Changes to risk profile. You guys said geographical changes, but you didn't talk about client types. Or what kind of clients do they handle? What kind of types of work do they do, right? Potential about large latent claims, you guys came to that. But then you have to then pivot and say, what about large losses? Right? I think somebody said, what about large losses reasons? That's a good point, but expand on that, right? So it's not just reasons for large losses, but future large losses as well, right? Individual losses by location. So the question clearly mentioned that they have multiple locations, which means that you have to get losses by location. You have to identify what locations they have, right? One more point which you guys mentioned in the previous question, but none of you guys mentioned here, was changes to terms and conditions. So changes to terms and conditions is another generic point that you can mention and plug anywhere, right? But you guys didn't generate that point, but you generated it in the previous question. You understand? That's where consistency needs to be there, right? And one question, one important point, one very good point, no excess, right? That's a very contextual point, Vidhi. I think that would have given you maybe a mark, right? If you have that, if you expand on that a little bit, not only 0.5 marks, it can also fetch you 1 mark because you're contextually you're asking that question, right? No excess. What is the reason for no excess? And can we, change the excess because that impacts the risk premium very well, right? So that I felt was a very good point. That's there. Let's go to the next part of this question. And I didn't mention it in the previous thing. I mentioned it separately because it's to me personally speaking, it was a very contentious question, right? And I'll explain why it was contentious after you guys solve the question, right? So now that you've arrived at your estimates of premiums and everything, the next part of the question says that the insurance company uses the following basis to calculate the quoted premium, right? What is the expenses? What is the proportion on the loss cost? They're asking you to calculate a gross premium, showing all the workings and stating assumptions that you have made. So just FYI, this is where you use the equations that we explained. You remember we built pricing equations in the last class?
Yes.
You have to build a pricing equation.
How will we know of reinsurance net premium?
Huh?
How will we know of reinsurance premium recovery?
Where is
They
the
have said capital required is 72% of net premium.
net premium is not premium with your definition of net premium should be different. Net
So
premium,
assume we net of commissions.
gross premium plus brokerage is net premium. You have to keep you have to be ready to change the definition as per your will. Remember, when you have doubt, change the definition. But make sure you document the change. Otherwise, it becomes difficult.
I've shared the answer, but I think it is wrong.
I have also shared, but I have taken a lot of assumptions.
This
Oh yeah,
is way too high for
Ankit,
gross
your
premium. This is way too,
risk premium was 7.9 and
yeah, way too high.
you've
I think
7x
some,
the answer.
yeah, yeah.
Ankur almost right. Almost right. You're off by $300,000.
So this question is in continuation to the previous one. Oh, I just assumed.
Okay.
I thought it was continuation.
Continuation. You have to use the same figure.
Maybe I know why. Because I have used net premium as risk premium.
You've used net premium as risk premium. Okay. I understood. But yeah, logic is very simple, right? You have the equations that you get, and you basically get expenses is already mentioned as. So if you look at the slide, expenses is 25% of the expected loss cost. So if RP is risk premium, expenses is 0.25 RP, right? Which is 0.25 into 7.83 million, which is about 1.95 billion. Then commission is 20% of the gross premium, right? So commission is calculated as 0.2 into GP, which you don't know yet. And then capital requirement, they've mentioned two things over here. One is 12.5% of capital should be required return, and capital required should be 72% of net premium. So your net premium is, your capital requirement is 0.125 into 0.72 into net premium, which is again 0.8 into GP, which you get to 7.2% of GP. And then you calculate GP using the straightforward equation, which comes to 13.24 million. And then you have your investment income is negligible, expenses covers all your whatever assumptions that you have, assume no reinsurance in place, assume no loading for tax and things like that, and you get the answer. Now, straightforward, in my opinion, just simple equation. Clear?
Yes. I added capital required also.
Now I'll tell you why this question specifically has heartburn for me. I will show you my answer, right? This was my answer. This was, I went to my exam sheet that I had submitted, because this was online, right? So I stored all the exam sheets. I copy pasted my answer and I pasted this. Out of 3 marks, how much do you think I got? So look at the answer. This is the answer in the examiner sheet, 13.44 million. My answer was 13.318 million. Right? My burning cost was, instead of 7.8, I got 7.9. So that's why there's a difference over here. But how much do you think I got out of 3 marks?
GP minus brokerage should be net premium, isn't it? Your net premium is that right? Like, I don't know. Shouldn't it be GP minus brokerage?
How is it GP minus brokerage? Net premium and gross premium, right?
Oh, sorry.
Where have I gone wrong? Or where have I gone right?
My net premium is 0.8 GP. So I'm subtracting brokerage from the gross premium.
That's one place. You're right. Ankit, you're right. I'm trying to gaslight you. That's one place. Where else have I gone wrong? Because of that one point, I went
Gross
wrong.
premium, expected
0.09
cost
net premium.
plus 6.
Yeah.
Then 6 plus return on capital. Okay.
So it is 0.072, no? You have written 0.72.
Correct.
I
No,
did the
that
same.
is 7.2. So if you multiply 0.125 into 0.72 into 0.8 gives you 0.07. The problem is I got 0.09 because of that one mistake. So from 7% it went to 9%. Which
And how much you got
I got 1.5 marks.
out of 3? Well,
Oh,
not
I felt really bad.
I mean, had I passed, then it's okay. Had I failed, then
I failed this paper by 1 mark.
then it's a heartbreak.
Literally, I failed this paper by a mark.
Then it's a heartbreak. Then
Marker 1 passed me, marker 2 failed me, marker 3 failed me by 1 mark.
yeah.
I think 60, if I'm not mistaken, 63 was the pass mark for this paper, and I got 62. So not even 1 mark, because I got some 62 point something, which got rounded down to 62.
Yeah.
I distinctly remember this. That's why I remember this question and I put it, so that you guys can also have a little bit of experience on this. So this is how it will be, right? So and the fact that I also did not mention a lot of assumptions also did not help, right? Had I mentioned more assumptions, I would have probably got more half mark, or maybe even 2.5 marks for this, right? So there was a reason why I lost marks, and the reason was simple mistakes here and there, right? And the idea here is to identify, I mean, like, point out all the mistakes, right? From, like, make sure you make the mistakes now and be clear when you go there, right? So that is all for today. Next week, we will do exposure curves, and then we will start our venture into GLMs, which is going to be the largest topic to discuss. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed the questions today. Next week, probably it will be a lot more challenging if I can make it. I'll try to make it more challenging.
Thank you. Can you please ask them to put
Yes,
the
Yeah.
slides that
I'm
we
going
do?
to. Yes, definitely. I'm going to upload it immediately as we speak, and I'll ask them to edit it and put the video.
Just if not the video, the slide is also okay to
Yeah.
begin.
Done. I will do that. We'll create something. Just hold on for a day or two, and I'll try to get the slides to you guys ASAP.
Not just this one.
The
Everything.
last class is also not there. The
The
same.
one
Yeah. I'll
first
follow
week
up with
of
them.
January.
No, I'll follow up with them for sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
And
Bye.
Sunil, I have your number, please? So in case they need it.
Sure. Just hold on. Can I just reach out to them and see if that's okay with them?
Oh, okay.
I don't know what the
Policy?
restrictions there are. So let me find out. Let me find out if they're okay. I'll give. I don't mind. But if they're okay, I'll give you guys my number. Okay. All right. Chalo. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Sunil,
Have a good day.
Tell me, Ankur.
yesterday you said that today
Yes.
we'll connect for
Yes.
half an hour for
Give me, can you give me like half an hour? 3 o'clock, shall we connect?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Thank you.
Chalo. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.